I'm going to give 6 minutes to Mr. Langhofer, 6 minutes to the county, and 6 minutes to the intervening party to state their positions as to what the court should do with the requested temporary restraining order. So beginning with you, Mr. Langhofer.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I'd like to make clear this is not a case about election fraud. This is a case about election administration. And the facts here are that in Maricopa County today, this is a case about Maricopa County elections and not other counties in the state. There have been issues with the printers and tabulators. The result of that in practice is that when ballots have been voted in person and they attempt to pass them through the tabulation machines, they are not processed correctly or certainly not easily, in some cases not correctly. This has been very upsetting to the voters in this county. We've been receiving calls all day from people who are affected by this, who have observed. And most disturbingly, as you've seen in the affidavits, we have evidence at this point that people would follow the instructions that were given to them by the poll workers. And the result of following those instructions is that their votes won't be counted. They'll go to another voting place, they'll ask for a ballot at a polling place where the tabulators actually work, and they'll be informed they've already voted at the first polling place, even though they couldn't vote at the first polling place because the ballots weren't tabulating correctly. And this appears to be a result of the county election workers not understanding the way of checking a voter out of a polling place, presumably because they were new at it or hadn't had experienced the issues before. But in any event, the result is voters follow instructions and are denied the right to vote. More importantly, Your Honor, this appears to be a widespread issue. Our reports are that it's affected more than a third of the polling places in Maricopa County. And we're just unaware of another case in Arizona or elsewhere where these sorts of issues have been so pervasive. And finally, on the facts, before I get to the remedy, I'll just observe that we don't have vote counts yet, but it's entirely possible that this issue, this disenfranchisement of voters voting today in Maricopa County, could determine who's our governor for the next 4 years and the majority control of the United States Senate. This is a consequential issue. On the law, I think the most important thing to know tonight is that we should not close the door to a remedy over time. We are not asking that you keep polling places open and that all those ballots necessarily count. What we're asking is that you keep them open and the votes that are cast after 7 p.m., or more precisely, people who get in line after 7 p.m., cast provisional ballots. We can return another day if those votes might affect the outcome of the election and litigate whether they should count or under what circumstances they should count. Will it be these voters or those voters or all of them? But the most important thing tonight is to not close the door on this sort of remedy for a widespread problem in the county that may determine the outcome of these very important, nationally important elections. So we'd ask you to extend the polling hours for provisional voting only from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock in Maricopa County and push back the reporting of election results by the same amount of time, 3 hours, so that folks aren't discouraged from voting by the early reports of voting they get from other parts of the state. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you. You have 2 more minutes if you have additional things you'd like to point out.
I'll save it for.
Relief, even half this relief would only be warranted if there was systematic failures, and they could show that polling places were closed down. 223 vote centers in Maricopa County, not a single one was closed, not for a single minute, not for an hour, not for 2 hours, not a single minute.
Every single one of them opened up at time at 6 a.m. And, Your Honor, as of this hour, they are still open. So no relief is warranted. Earlier, Your Honor, we heard from plaintiff that some voters were denied the opportunity to vote. That is simply not true. Every single lawful voter had 27 days to vote, including on this day, Election Day. Anyone who chooses to vote on Election Day is free to do so. It's their right to do so. And when they do so, they have from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. to do it. And anyone who went to any one of those 223 voting places today, Your Honor, arrived, checked into the site book, was given a ballot, was given an appropriate amount of time to fill out the ballot, on average 13 minutes, and then was afforded an opportunity to place that ballot and have it tabulated on a precinct tabulator. And every single 2 years it happens. Sometimes the tabulators read them, sometimes they don't. And what they don't, what Maricopa County does is what the other 14 counties do in Arizona, is they put them into a ballot box. We call it drawer number 3. And those ballots all go down to Central County and are tabulated. Every single one of them. Every voter who arrived at any one of the 223 voting stations today, anytime between 6 a.m. and this moment, is afforded that opportunity. No one was told they couldn't vote. No one was denied a ballot. Not a single person. And, Your Honor, if we know one thing from Bush v. Gore back in 2000, but didn't trigger anybody, it's that we must treat all the counties the same. We can't now have the votes of the polls closing as the law requires at 7 p.m. in 14 counties, but not in Maricopa County. That's not giving equal access to the ballots of everybody. So the relief would be more harmful constitutionally, Your Honor, than the current situation. And there's ample opportunity for anyone to vote in Maricopa County. 27 days, including 12 hours. And in another courtroom, on this very same floor, Your Honor, plaintiff is saying that poll workers are working too many hours. And now they come before the court and say, let's add an additional 3. Well, as nonsensical as that sounds, Your Honor, let me add one more point. And that is, it would be impossible at this late hour, if this court were to grant the relief, for Maricopa County to communicate out to every single one of those 223 polling places that are currently busy helping voters vote, that they need to not shut down as they've been told to do, instructed to do, and trained to do, and are prepared to do at 7 p.m. and stay open. We literally don't have the capability of communicating that to all 223 before 7 p.m. So I would argue that it's not only impractical, that it's probably impossible for us to do that. That some would in fact close. If you were to rule right now, we couldn't get on the phone and call them because most of them won't answer the phone right now because they're helping voters. We'd have to drive people out, and we don't have enough. So I'd say the prayer for relief is unwarranted. And finally, Your Honor, it would be a recipe for voter fraud. We've heard constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, voter integrity, voter integrity, voter integrity for 2 solid years. If we keep these polling places open for 3 more hours and say anybody who wants to can come in and say, oh, I tried to vote early but wasn't able to, even though the records say, let me vote again, we violated the sacrosanct fundamental aspect of American constitutional democracy, and that is one person, one vote. We'd have to take people on their word. I showed up in Queen Creek to vote. They asked me to put it in the third drawer. I decided not to do it. I tried to spoil my ballot. I don't know if it was spoiled or not. I left, and now I'm showing up at another vote center because the court that I can after the vote's supposed to close, and I'm going to vote again. There is no way to reconcile whether that individual voted and had that vote tabulated at the polling place or is going to be tabulated at NICTAC. And so you're opening up the door to voter fraud. And so for those reasons, Your Honor, I would urge the court to deny the TRO.
Thank you. On behalf of the intervening party?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll begin with arguing that the plaintiff should be denied based on the doctrine of latches. I'm looking at the time now. We are less than 20 minutes away from polls being closed. This is an issue that was brought to my attention, I believe, to the Republicans' attention by the county this morning beginning at 9 a.m. And it wasn't until this late hour that this TRO was filed about 15 minutes ago. And when I look at the TRO, I think it's important to note that in the affidavits that are attached, the conduct at issue in those affidavits occurred this morning. The plaintiff simply waited too long to file this lawsuit. And here we are in a situation where I believe it would be impossible for Your Honor to issue an order that the county could actually implement in a way and effectuate in a way that does not sow voter confusion and unfairness to the voters that otherwise listen to the county's instructions. It is simply too late for that to be communicated in an orderly fashion, given that we are this far away from polls being closed. Turning to the actual burden that the plaintiffs would have to meet in order to get this injunction, even beginning with the likelihood, or I should say here, the unlikelihood to succeed on the merits. The statutes in Arizona law are very clear about polling hours, and it's very clear on when poll locations are to be closed. There's been instances in the past where folks on my side of the aisle have attempted to extend the voting hours based on delays at various polling locations, and those attempts have been denied by this court. And again, there's nothing different about cases in this case, and therefore the court should deny an extension of the hours. When turning to irreparable harm, again, when I look at the affidavits, I think it's important to note that I do not see in any of the affidavits an actual irreparable harm. Again, when I look at the affidavits, I think it's important to note that I do not see in any of the affidavits an actual allegation that a single voter spoiled their ballot, went to a second location, and were unable to actually vote that ballot. That is simply not in the affidavits that I see here. And again, as Mr. Liddy has argued, and as the chairman of Maricopa County Board of Supervisors has said publicly, not a single voter in Maricopa County was denied the right to vote as a result of these tabulation machine errors. So in the end, Your Honor, 15 minutes before ballots, or I should say, polling locations are supposed to close.
Thank you. Mr. Langhoffer, you would reserve time.
Thank you, Your Honor. What we haven't heard from the county directions they were given and were disenfranchised. Look at the declarations from Mr. Lewandowski or the.
Mr. Langhoffer, how do I glean that there's 36%? What analysis was that? How did you come up with that number?
Well, the county this morning put out a press release that said 20% of their sites were affected. That was this morning, and as we've gone throughout the day, we've found more of those. I can get you more precise numbers if you'd like, or bring onto the horn some of the folks in our room who've been taking those reports and counting them up. In fact, if the data that I have suggests it may be as high as 40%, but we're comfortable saying it was more than 1/3. That's a lot. That is systemic. That's not something we see in comparable cases. So yes, the relief is extreme. As being denied the right to vote. And they're also not denying that in this election, we'll know more tonight, we'll know more tomorrow and by Friday, in this election, these errors can determine the outcome of the governor's race and the Senate race. They're not denying that. So we're not asking that, as Mr. Liddy says, you throw open the doors and everyone can come in and just say they voted, tried to vote ballot, and we're going to fight about those later. Well, we might fight about those later. If the margin of victory or loss is so close that it could determine the outcome, then we'll come back to you and we'll argue about what to do with these ballots that are voted provisionally. But for now, they're just going to vote provisionally. Go ahead, Your Honor.
I'm looking at declarations, and I don't see that anyone wasn't allowed to vote. They all were able to vote.
Mr. Lewandowski was not able. The Masons were not able to vote.
Well, I don't need semantics. They ultimately got a vote that was collected and put in. They didn't write these in like the process. It might have been a little unorthodox in their review, but from what I've seen, they all got a collection of their vote, whether it was a provisional vote or put in a box. It was collected and retained. So it's there, and I'm assuming under the Maricopa County protocols, if it's ultimately processed, you can see that they processed your vote online when you check your voter ID information. So do you disagree that there are 223 vote centers that remained open from the beginning time it's called for by the Arizona legislature statute?
My understanding is that the Burton Bar Library right now, this is not in the record, but I can tell you my understanding. The Burton Bar Library has, which is supposed to be a voting center, supposed to be up until 7 o'clock, is now saying their tabulators don't work. All you can do is off mail-in ballots. You're not going to be able to get a new ballot there and vote it like you should be able to. You've got to find a new place in the next 12 minutes. Go. And Your Honor, factually, I do not agree these people have been able to vote. Mr. Lewandowski spoiled his ballot, so it's not in the tab. Box 3 to be counted downtown later. It was spoiled. They told him to go to a new place. He goes to the new place, tries to submit his mail-in vote, his mail-in ballot, because he still has it. And he was told, nope, you can't do it. You've already voted another center. He had it. It's not there. Now, the Masons were ultimately able to vote a provisional ballot at a second place.
Isn't that a valid ballot, a provisional ballot? I mean, you're acting like that's not a vote. That's a valid ballot, isn't it?
Vote will not be tabulated, because if you show up at a voting center and you say, I'm here to vote, they check their computer and that shows that you voted before, they're going to let you cast a provisional ballot, but they're not going to count it, right? These provisional ballots for people who went to the second site and hadn't been checked out of the first site, they're there, they exist, but they're not going to be counted under the law as it's currently written. Now, I don't know whether that's going to be material to the outcome of these elections yet, because we don't have the voting results yet. But it very well may be. And so we need you to let people cast these provisional votes. We'll come back later and fight about whether they should be counted. Obviously, if people follow the instructions of the poll workers and they lost the right because they followed those instructions, that is not right. That is not the way we run elections in a free society.
What about the concerns raised by the county that doing what you're suggesting will actually increase voter fraud as opposed to preventing voter fraud?
I disagree with that, Your Honor.
Risk of voter fraud.
I disagree with that, because what we're going to do is take in these ballots over the next 3 hours and 10 minutes or so, well, 3 hours, let's say, and set them aside. And we're going to have a fight later on, if it is material to the outcome, about whether to count them, right? Just letting people put their marks on a paper, put it in a provisional envelope and setting it aside, that's not affecting the outcome of an election. We're going to come back later when it's not rushed at 7 o'clock on election day and say, okay, let's call this person in, let's have them swear. Did you try to vote before or not? We're going to be able to check the electronic poll books at that point and see earlier in the day, right? Does your story match the electronic records we have? And we can determine which of them to count. We're not asking you to have them cast non-provisional ballots, right? So they're automatically tabulated. That's not the request. It's just provisionals, put them in an envelope, set them aside. We'll talk about them later if it would affect the outcome.
All right.
Your Honor, I believe I have 20 seconds.
You do.
Thank you, Your
But
Honor.
Mr. Langhoffer, you have the last word, so go ahead.
Your Honor, each voter was given the opportunity to fill out a ballot and put it into the ballot box. If they chose not to, it was a volitional act of the voter. No law required them to not put it in drawer number 3. No law told them they had. And the law is the same for everyone across the county and across the state. So they had their opportunity to put it in drawer number 3, Your Honor, and that's their choice, not the county's imposition.
Thank you. Mr. Langhoffer, did you want to be heard on that point?
Yes, Your Honor. So what happens is people go in, generally election day voters or folks who've been watching the news over the last couple of years, and they've got earnest concerns about the way this goes down, about how their ballots are counted. They want to make sure it counts. And one of the benefits of voting on election day is you can get that piece of paper and you can put it in the machine yourself. You can watch it be counted. And people find that satisfying. It increases confidence in our elections. This is very healthy for our system. So they put it into the ballot machine, the tabulator, it comes back out. try again. Mr. Lewinsky tries 30 times. They say to the election workers, hey, it's not working. I want to watch my vote be counted. This is, again, good for the system. The elections workers say, well, you can put it in this box and we'll get around to counting it later. Okay, that's one option. What's behind door number two, right? What else can I do? Well, spoil that ballot, go to the next voting center over, and their tabulators work. You can watch it go in there. So people say, okay, I like that idea better. I have a little bit of time. I'm going to go down the street. They're following the options that are given to them by the county. And by doing that, they lose their right to vote. That is very troubling.
Your Honor, may I have a word before the final word by Mr. Langhofer?
Go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Yes. So again, I want to reiterate precedent here. We have had 2 prior election cycles in 2016 and 2018 where we have had delays, long lines at polling locations. And again, there was a request for an extension of hours that was denied because, again, Arizona law very clearly sets forth the hours at polling locations. In this case, as we've been going back and forth on, there still, in my view, have not been any evidence presented that any voter was actually denied the right to vote. And in addition, as Mr. Liddy has pointed out, a voter at a location that faced this issue had several different options when it came to having their vote counted. They could have put it in Tray B. In a lot of locations, there was an accessible electronic machine that they could have voted on. So there were options for that particular voter. And again, looking at the affidavits or declarations, if you will, there still isn't any allegation that a voter, even Mr. Lewandowski, who was actually denied the right to vote. Thank you.
Court makes several findings of fact and conclusions of law as to the statute that applies to the operating hours during elections. The court finds the Arizona legislature has determined there is a benefit of having a statutory mandated presumptive closing time of 7 p.m. The court does not have any evidence to the contrary that there were 223 vote centers open and that no one who showed up between the hours of 6 a.m. and 7 p.m. have been precluded from turning in a ballot, whether it's an actual ballot or a provisional ballot. The declarations from the court's perspective to show that although there might have been some confusion and some difficulties, that all the individuals in the declarations filed either a provisional ballot or a direct ballot vote. The court does not have any evidence that there's a voter who was precluded the right to vote from what was presented. There was an opportunity and is an opportunity until 7 p.m. for every Arizona to get in line and to vote. The court was thinking of this as issues of impossibility of performance, but I was wondering why the filing was when this was an issue according to the declarations and other information that was known in the morning. So I do believe that the doctrine of the latch is applied, and this is something that would be impossible to perform, as we're here at 6:55, and I would have no way to communicate. Even if I were to agree with the moving party who's asking for the TRO, there'd be no way to actually effectuate such an order at this late time. So the temporary restraining order. Mr. Langhofer, are you asking for any additional orders from the court at this time?
I don't think we need anything tonight, Your Honor, but we'd like to keep the broad case open, of course, and if appropriate, we'll either dismiss or come back for additional proceedings on the merits.
Would it be the purpose of the party that set a status conference that works for your calendars and we can come back?
Judging it later in the week. If we set it up for tomorrow morning or Wednesday morning, I don't think we're going to have enough numbers to know whether the number of votes at issue here would affect the outcome. And I don't think we're looking for advisory opinions on issues that don't affect the outcome of elections.
Would, Your Honor, respectfully, this case is moot in 3 minutes.
It is. It's not being dismissed by me outright. I'm just saying I can give a status conference because he may be dismissing it on his own. I'm not going to be getting any relief. I'm just giving you a landing place to show up, and if you need additional court involvement or discussion, that's your opportunity. That's all I'm doing. There's a lot of work and effort that went into this evening, and I want to give the parties to have court involvement if they think that's appropriate. That's all. It may be that you're going to have a motion to dismiss, If you agree, you think it shouldn't go forward, that'll be a discussion we'll have when we come back on. What's our next available morning calendar date? Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday next week? You know what? Let's call it an hour. It might be just 5 minutes. I don't know. We'll afford the time. And then if it's not needed, we can have folks move on and do other things with their day. Tuesday, November 15th at 10 a.m. for 1 hour. Does that work for your schedules? 10:15.
As it happened, we have a oral argument in the Arizona Supreme Court at 10:15. So
Maybe we won't bump into that.
So do we, same oral argument.
Same oral argument, okay.
No,
How about if I just bring this down and we'll handle the status conference after you're done with your oral argument? You save you time and effort. A little later in the week.
That'd be great, Your Honor.